Across the barren deserts of Mongolia, a group of exhausted travelers wanders beneath the merciless sun, desperately searching for water after going days without a single drop. Their bodies are weak, their lips are dry, and every step feels like it could be their last. Suddenly, an old man stops and stares into the distance. He believes he sees water, but his companion insists it is only a mirage. The old man refuses to listen and begins walking toward it, forcing the others to follow. When they finally reach the place, they discover something unbelievable: a real well. Hope suddenly returns to their faces. They drink deeply, wash their hands and faces, and fill every container they have. For the first time in days, they feel as though they have been given another chance at life. The group considers staying beside the well for several days because the water supply seems endless. But Janusz warns them that water alone will not keep them alive. They have almost nothing left to eat, and sooner or later, hunger will kill them. Some of the men argue that they are too weak to continue, but Janusz insists that they must move forward. The next day, they drink as much water as possible and carry whatever they can before continuing their journey. Then the story suddenly takes us back to where everything began. It is the time of World War II, after the Soviet Union has invaded Poland and captured countless people. Among the prisoners is a Polish army officer named Janusz. The authorities accuse him of serious crimes and demand that he sign a document admitting them, but he refuses. The Soviet officers bring in Janusz's wife and ask whether she knows the prisoner. She confirms that he is her husband, and Janusz admits the same. Then the officer forces her to reveal what she supposedly knows about him. Under unbearable pressure, she claims that Janusz hates the Communist Party and spies for other countries. Janusz is devastated, but he understands that she has been forced into making the accusation. In 1940, he is sentenced to 20 years and transported to a prison deep inside Siberia. The place is surrounded by thousands of kilometers of frozen wilderness, making escape almost impossible. An officer tells the new prisoners that the prison is not merely the camp behind the fences. The entire frozen land is their prison. Even if nature does not kill them, local people may, because every escaped prisoner carries a reward. While standing in the food line, Janusz witnesses an old prisoner accidentally drop part of his bread. Another elderly man immediately tries to steal it, but the first man steps on the bread and saves it. Watching this, Janusz quietly gives his own food to the starving old man. Another prisoner warns him that such kindness could get him killed because nobody can survive in the camp on half a ration. Janusz simply points out the man's age, but the other prisoner coldly replies that he may still survive until morning, while the old man probably will not. Soon, another prisoner approaches Janusz and asks about his sentence. Janusz says 20 years. The man reveals that he received 10 years for being an actor who made a wealthy character appear too rich in a film. Janusz is stunned that acting could lead to such a punishment. The actor tells Janusz that nobody has ever escaped from the prison and warns him never to even consider it. Yet, after some time passes, the actor secretly shows Janusz a possible escape route. He has been searching for someone brave enough to attempt the impossible. Their destination would be far to the north, across the border, and eventually into Mongolia, but they must wait for winter to end and gather enough food for a journey covering thousands of kilometers. Meanwhile, the prisoners are forced to cut timber in the frozen wilderness. One day, violent winds strike while they are returning from the forest, and several men collapse from the freezing cold. An older prisoner named Mr. Smith insists that they must reach the forest or they will die. The officer refuses because he knows the forest could provide an escape route. Smith ignores the order and walks toward the trees, even as the officer threatens to shoot him. Seeing Smith refuse to stop, the officer finally orders everyone into the forest, and the prisoners survive the deadly storm. But the next day, they are assembled and selected for another assignment. Smith is called forward and sarcastically told that he seems to love the cold before being sent away with several others, including Janusz. Smith realizes the truth immediately. They are being sent to the mines, a place filled with deadly pollution and almost no hope of survival. While working there, Janusz begins suffering from powerful hallucinations. He sees his home, a stone outside the house, and a key hidden beneath it. In the vision, he retrieves the key and enters his home, only to encounter a guard preparing to shoot him. Just before the hallucination becomes reality, Smith intervenes and pulls Janusz away. Smith asks Janusz whether he has lost his mind, warning him that the guard could have killed him. Janusz refuses to remain in the camp. He reveals that the actor has a plan to escape, but Smith dismisses the idea as a lie. He had heard the same promises when he first arrived. Still, Smith agrees to join Janusz because he understands something about him. His greatest weakness is his humanity. Smith explains that he was the old man whose food Janusz had saved earlier. He believes that if he becomes sick or injured, Janusz will never abandon him. Soon, 7 prisoners secretly unite around the escape plan. Janusz, Smith, the actor, a criminal, an artist, a man with poor night vision, and another prisoner. They wait for the perfect opportunity, knowing one mistake will bring death. One night, a violent storm creates exactly the opportunity Janusz has been waiting for. He explains that the powerful winds will erase their footprints, making it difficult for the guards to determine which direction they have taken. They shut down the camp generator, knowing it can remain off for only 10 minutes. During that brief window, the 7 men cut through the metal wires and disappear into the darkness. When the guards discover the escape, they attempt to pursue them, but the storm makes visibility almost impossible. Finally, the guards release dogs to track the fugitives. The 7 men run blindly through the freezing night, while the wind tears across the landscape. Janusz takes a knife from the criminal and quickly creates crude face coverings so they can protect themselves from the freezing air and keep moving. The fugitives continue walking throughout the night, and by morning they are far from the Siberian prison. The snow is so deep that the guards and their dogs struggle to follow. When the group stops to examine their supplies, they realize they have only enough food for a few weeks. Yet their journey toward Mongolia will take far longer. Smith warns Janusz that trusting the criminal was dangerous because the man is ruthless, and once killed another prisoner simply to take his sweater. Janusz knows the criminal has a knife, and that weapon may become essential. They continue north using the shadows to guide their direction, knowing they must cross Siberia and eventually reach Mongolia. As night approaches, hunger forces them to stop. One man suggests setting traps for food, while the criminal proposes entering a village and taking supplies. Janusz refuses, fearing they will be captured. With another freezing night approaching, Janusz orders everyone to collect firewood. Among them is a prisoner who cannot see properly at night, though most of the group does not know this. While carrying wood back, the man becomes lost in the darkness. When the others return, they realize one member is missing. Only one of them knows the truth about his eyesight, and they desperately search for him through the night. By morning, they find him some distance away, frozen to death. The group buries him and continues forward, carrying the weight of another loss. Days pass. The endless snow eventually gives way to forests, but the survivors are starving and exhausted. They were supposed to reach a distant lake a week earlier, yet they are still far away. Then, while sleeping, they hear animals nearby and discover wolves feeding on a fresh kill. Driven beyond hunger, the men chase the wolves away and eat the remains like wild animals simply to stay alive. Janusz realizes that the others are too weak to continue, so he decides to go ahead alone and search for the route to the lake. Before leaving, he tells them that if he does not return within a week, they must assume he is dead. He then walks into the wilderness, weak from hunger and facing an enormous distance alone. As his strength fades, the hallucinations return. Once again, he sees his home and the stone hiding the key beneath it. Yet somehow he survives and eventually returns to his companions. Janusz tells them that the lake is only 3 days away, then collapses from exhaustion. By morning, he recovers enough strength for them to continue. While traveling toward the lake, they realize someone appears to be following them. When they catch the stranger, they discover a young woman hiding from the Russians. She begs to join them, but the men refuse because their food supply is already dangerous. The group leaves the woman behind and finally reaches the lake. There, they discover an animal trapped in the marsh, and they kill it for food. Suddenly, they have enough meat to survive for a while. One of the men remembers the starving woman they abandoned and decides to find her. By nightfall, he returns with her, and the group finally accepts her into their ranks. For the first time in weeks, they eat until they are full and sleep peacefully. The following day, the journey continues. At first, the woman lies about her past, but eventually she reveals the truth. After several more days, they finally reach the Mongolian border. Their journey has already taken them through freezing mountains and endless forests, where they have eaten insects, dead animals, and even a dog simply to stay alive. Before crossing the border, however, the Russian criminal decides to stop and remain behind. The group is now reduced to 6. After crossing into Mongolia, the survivors see a portrait of Stalin displayed at the entrance and immediately realize the communists have reached this land as well. The freedom they expected is nowhere to be found, so they move onward. Their new plan is to travel through China, then Tibet, and finally reach British-controlled India, where they believe they will be safe. By this point, they have already walked thousands of kilometers and their bodies are nearly destroyed. But the road ahead is still brutal. To reach India, they must cross the Himalayas and then face scorching heat, thirst, and a vast desert. The woman traveling with them repeatedly collapses because their bodies desperately need water. The group struggles forward, knowing that without water, their journey will end in death. Eventually, the story catches up with the scene from the beginning, where the exhausted travelers discover the miraculous well in the middle of the desert. After finding the well, the survivors refill their supplies and continue into an enormous desert. Soon they are hit by violent sandstorms, and the young woman collapses again. When the men examine her feet, they realize they are badly swollen and she can barely walk. Yet she refuses to stop because she does not want to slow the others down. She pushes herself forward, but her body can no longer withstand the journey. Eventually, she dies in the desert. The survivors bury her and continue walking because stopping means death for everyone. It is only 5 in the afternoon, but none of them has the strength to keep moving. Still, they force themselves onward. After several more kilometers, another member collapses and dies. Now only 4 remain. They are starving, dehydrated, and almost completely broken, while the mountains ahead seem impossibly far away. The 4 survivors finally reach the edge of the desert, where mountains rise in the distance, signaling that the worst of the sand may soon be behind them. But Smith is too weak to continue. He collapses and tells Janusz to leave him behind because he cannot take another step. Janusz refuses. He tells Smith that they will continue together and asks the other 2 men to go ahead and search for water. The 2 move forward while Janusz stays with Smith. By nightfall, they reunite and sleep on the desert floor. They have gone days without food, and their bodies are barely functioning. At dawn, one of the men notices a snake moving across his leg. He tries to catch it because they desperately need food, but while following it, he notices something far more important: a tiny stream of water coming from a rock. Their despair instantly turns into hope. They gather around the rock and desperately drink the precious water. After drinking the water, the survivors manage to catch and eat the snake, giving their exhausted bodies a little strength. That night, Janusz sits beside Smith and finally speaks about the pain they have both carried for years. He tells Smith that he knew the Russians had killed his son and even knows the boy's name: David. Smith is shaken. He asks whether Janusz is trying to awaken his desire to live again, because he has come to believe that life itself is a punishment and death is freedom. Janusz challenges him, asking why he did not simply kill himself. Smith explains that he has remained alive as a punishment for bringing his son into Russia. The Russians captured them and forced his son to testify against him. After the boy was forced to accuse his father, the Russians killed him. Smith then realizes that Janusz understands his pain, because Janusz's own wife had also been forced to testify against him. Janusz tells Smith that his wife is still alive, and he refuses to believe she is dead. He knows she must be carrying the same guilt Smith has carried for years, believing that her forced testimony destroyed her husband. That is why Janusz is determined to return to her no matter what it costs. The next morning, the 4 survivors continue their journey. After hundreds of kilometers, they reach the Great Wall of China. But China is not safe because war is raging between China and Japan, so they turn toward Tibet instead. Once again, enormous mountains stand between them and freedom. Exhausted and nearly defeated, they somehow cross the mountains and reach Tibet. There, Tibetan people welcome them with food and kindness. They learn that a route through Sikkim can lead them toward India, but the locals warn them that winter storms make the crossing deadly. They advise the travelers to wait until the weather improves. Janusz refuses to wait. He fears that if they stop moving, their exhausted bodies will lose the strength needed to continue. Smith has another plan. He explains that he is American and has heard about a United States military program operating in China. If he can reach it, he may be able to get to America. That night, the exhausted travelers sleep together one final time. The next morning, Janusz and two companions continue onward while Smith remains behind. Their separation is deeply emotional because Smith knows that if he is alive at all, it is largely because Janusz refused to abandon him. Their paths have reached different destinations, but the bond created through suffering remains. Janusz and the others continue across the mountains, finally reaching India after an extraordinary journey covering thousands of kilometers. They are welcomed safely, and for most of the survivors, the terrible journey finally comes to an end. But Janusz's journey is not truly over. Poland is still under communist rule, so he cannot return home. For the next 50 years, he remains separated from his homeland and the woman he never stopped believing was alive. Then, in 1989, Poland finally becomes free, and elderly Janusz returns home after decades of exile. As he approaches his old house, he sees the same stone from his memories. Beneath it is the key he had seen countless times in his hallucinations. With trembling hands, he retrieves it and unlocks the gate. He slowly enters the house, and there she is, his wife, still alive after all those years. The two look at each other, overwhelmed by everything they have lost and everything they have survived. Then they embrace and cry, finally reunited after half a